the game of life and the hero's journey we all experience. Let's jump in with our host, Dylan Watkins, as he introduces today's guest.
Are you interested in finding ways to use technologies as tools to help you become better, to help you become more, to help you not be codependent or dependent upon the technologies, but use it as a way to serve you and serve humanity? Well, on today's podcast, I have Patrick Hilsbos. He is passionate about music, harmony, and beauty. He has deep experience in applying advanced neuroscience technologies for transformative experiences with a proven success track around serving Fortune 500 companies, leading universities, and high-growth startups. He is the CEO and founder of Neuromore, which empowers leading companies to integrate and optimize neurotechnologies and AI, resulting in smarter experiences, applications, and ecosystems. So without any further delay, I'd like to welcome the long-awaited Patrick Hilsbos. Hey!
Hello!
I'm so excited to get you on, man. We've had some back and forth, some missed opportunities for us to be able to connect, and not even technology will prevent us from getting together. So I'm excited. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and
Yeah.
I'm also very glad that we made it.
Yeah, brother, absolutely. Totally resonate. We were talking before the show a bit about what's the message you want to get out there, and what does that look like, and there's this idea of using technology as a tool versus having technology use us as a tool, and really having it serve us to become better in the mental health space and other spaces. And that's the message that you really want to get out there. I'd like to kind of kick things off just a little bit, just kind of understanding a bit of your journey to brought you to Neuromore and what you do today. Can you kind of paint the dots of the journey of how you got started and brought you up to the space?
Oh yeah, totally. So I was born and raised in Germany, and I got started pretty early with technology. So since I can remember, I was drawn to switches, cables, there's those family stories that when I was 4 or 5 years old, I was kind of taking things apart and playing around with stuff. So it was from the very first beginning, kind of that draw towards tech. And then that also resulted me in starting my first IT software company back in 1999 when I was 13 years old. So what I did then was the early days of the internet and VPN, and I kind of helped companies to do secure communication over the internet. And since then, I've been involved in many different companies and startups all of them were focused on IT and software. So from a networking standpoint over cybersecurity, I was involved in the creation of some semantic expert systems, kind of like AI, but not in the way how people use it those days mostly. So not deep learning, but having a bunch of rules and a knowledge graph to kind of answer particular questions. So I've been doing that until 2013. And I guess initially inspired through my dad, but then also other influences. I guess starting with 12, 13, 14 years old, I also got somehow interested in spirituality, in human behavior, psychology. So it was a hobby. And when I was younger, I didn't put a lot of attention to it. But then my dad, when I was 18 years old, took me to India. I spent some time there, and it was kind of living, during the day, I had my software, cybersecurity, software architecture job. And at night, on the weekends, and every spare time, I used to travel around and read. And I always have been curious in the full spectrum. There was a weekend where I attended a neuroscience conference. And the next weekend, I found myself at a quantum healing hippie-ish, gathering, and just soaking it all in. And that resulted in me in 2013 buying an emotive epoch. So I had many different variables and biosensors, and playing around with them. I got very excited when Emotive released the kind of like one of the first consumer-facing and legit brain-computer interfaces. So I bought myself one of those, and have to admit, the first couple of days it was insanely exciting. Like looking at my brain waves and tinkering around with their SDK, and I saw the potential of those tools and technologies. Like back in the day, like I've been hacking computer systems, so then I also kind of like disembarked on like hacking the mind, hacking consciousness, and like hacking in terms of like building tools, exploiting things, kind of like seeing what we can do. Like those days, we also have like that branch of like neurohacking, like consciousness hacking is out there, biohacking. None of those things like really existed, or at least have not been in my awareness, like back in the day. And yeah, went online having that device and saw all that research, having a brain computer interface. So I stumbled over a lot of research in the realm of neurofeedback and automated CBT, like cognitive behavior therapy, and so on. And what I wanted to do initially was very simple. It was like, oh, there's all those PDFs, Google Scholar, and you name it. And I just wanted to put that research to work. I was like, okay, there's like clearly written what needs to happen. I have a device. I can do coding. I have other people with coding, so it cannot be that complicated. So initially I was looking for software that enabled me to put the research to work, but I didn't find any. I stumbled up over like 2 or 3 tools, but they felt like not sexy, very limited. So I kind of disregarded them. And over the course of the next couple of months, so like the whole journey started in like early 2013, like finding that tool. And what happened, like after a couple of months, my back in the day consulting cybersecurity company ended up partnering up with the University of Stuttgart, their Institute of Human-Computer Interaction. And we started to create a first prototype, what's now known as the Neuromore Studio. Like a simple push button, easy way where you can almost draw what's written in those papers to put the research to work to apply it.
That's awesome. So, I mean, one, it's funny because I've just noticed this as there's a journey that, especially people in this transformative technology type of spaces, where you go and you kind of overdevelop that prefrontal cortex, learning and growing and really doing, right? And then there's a gap that you feel of the other side of yourself, the embodied, the feeling, the sensory, if you want to call it the vagus nerve limbic system part of things, that is all about the feeling sensational, right? And so you go, okay, how do I get these two worlds to merge together? The productivity, the doing, going that, and then the flowing and letting go, or if you want to talk about it, the masculine and the feminine energy, whatever you want to communicate it as. And I like how you're bridging these things together, because sometimes it's very hard, like the flow culture. It's very difficult to quantify and measure, flow states, and what does it look like to be mindful and happy and all that stuff. And you're bridging these two worlds together that don't always fit. And you talked about, that technologies, or let's say not technologies, frameworks and protocols and health protocols, CBT and all those other ones work, right? And then you're quantifying certain behavioral effective changes using AIs and other types of systems. I'm sure brainwaves and HRVs and other types of data sets. And you're combining those two frameworks together. And you're saying, okay, if I apply this framework, I'm turning this into a game and I'm getting these results based upon this framework for effectively creating human behavioral change, because that's what we're talking about right now. The ability to shift one person's state from A to B, whatever that might be, or C. So looking at that, you're talking about, okay, so what are the frameworks that you're talking about that actually work? And then how are you measuring it with AI or biofeedback specifically? What does that look like in terms of someone's here, they're upset, they're an overburned A-type, they really want to get mindful, and okay, so normally say go off to the jungles and take a whole bunch of ayahuasca and come back enlightened. That's one path. You're talking about using biofeedback and other frameworks to be able to shift them into a more holistic human. Can you speak more to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that also relates to the journey that we have been on, like since Neuromore, because after we had that initial prototype of the software, I also decided together with my co-founder that we want to fully focus on Neuromore. So we kind of like quit our like previous lives, like working for corporations in the cybersecurity space, and then focus, okay, let's fully focus on Neuromore. And I would say we have been pretty naive and pretty excited, because in early 2014, we were like, oh, we have the holy grail, we have the tools and the technologies. We will democratize mental health, like pills are stone age, we can digitize all the things that the world needs to heal, to feel better, and just roll it out. Well, the market hasn't been really ready, so we ended up pretty much in the space, or kind of getting a deep understanding of what you just asked for. Because for the next 2.5 years, we have been mostly working with universities and neuroscience labs, consciousness researchers, providing them with a software platform. So we're a software company. We don't do any hardware, but we connect to different modalities. And with modalities, I mean, we started off with like brainwaves, brain-computer interfaces, but then also are the heart rate variability, galvanic skin response, camera streams, and so on. And just serving universities and researchers. And also, like, to be in full transparency, it has been a struggle, because initially we tried to monetize it and they were like, okay, like it's not easy to do that. And then I also felt like an analogy would be like, I was like, oh, those are the artists, and like Spotify is not charging like the artists, like Spotify is trying to get as many of the artists on the platform, trying to roll it out. So initially we spent a lot of time with the artists, the scientists, and got a really broad understanding what is out there, what is working, what is not working so well, and so on. And from a quantification standpoint, we have been initially involved with more objective assessments, which means if we look at brainwaves, there's certain frequency ratios based on placements, quantitative EEGs, where you look at like the whole brain and kind of like frequency relations to it. If we talk about heart rate variability, then you also look at the spectrum. To a very basic thing is to understand what's the ratio between your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, kind of like how stressed are you, if you have a whoop, like the number of what's my heart rate variability currently, like those kind of things, to have an objective understanding. If you talk about HRV, how stressed am I? Or if I look at certain areas of the brain and say, oh, maybe there's a little bit too much alpha or like theta, then, oh, maybe I have some ADHD here, like on a very like objective level. But then later on, we also added subjective assessments, because we realized that it's totally possible that the data points tell us, oh, you should be very stressed. But if I ask you, like, how do you feel? I say, I'm totally fine. So what are we going to do now? Should I convince you that you should feel more stressed, or should I just like say, oh, like, just maybe stick with it, which has been one of the issues with a bunch of sleep research projects that we have been involved in, which is very interesting, because if you wake up and you're tired, then eventually you already know it. So there's no real benefit of the system now telling you, oh, Dylan, you're tired. But what we've also seen on the other hand, that is a lot of people woke up and they felt totally fine until they looked at the data, and then the system told them, oh, you should be tired. And then guess what happened,
Yeah. I get that a lot with Whoop. It actually really annoys me with the Whoop, because like I'll get 8 hours of sleep, but I don't get sleep from the night before or whatever. And it goes, you need 10.5 hours of sleep. I'm like, no, I don't. I went to bed. I woke up when I'm ready. I'm good. Like, I know you're telling me that I need more. And I like the game of seeing more of my REMs go up and all that jazz. But when I see it, I'm like, I don't need 10 and a half hours of sleep to get out of my sleep debt, quote unquote. I don't need it. I went to bed, I woke up, I got 8 hours of sleep. I'm good. Let's get this party started. And so you're right. There is a bit of that. You have three ways to measure it for anybody that's curious, right? You have objective, right? Observed and self-reported, right? Those are the three ways that you can really report the data. So objective data is what you're talking about, the biofeedbacks, the AIs, the measurement tools, the galvanized skin response, all that stuff. So you have that. And so you're adding in the self-reported, surveys. How do I feel? What does that look like? But I don't know if you have any objective, but it sounds like you were doing that with some of the universities, right? You were having that trifecta of measurements, the A, B, and C. Have you integrated that into the neuromore system? Because you're talking about it as a software platform. So is it you do biofeedback reports along with self-reports, along with objective reports? Can you talk to me about who specifically uses neuromore and then how they're actually applying it? And I know it's a startup, we're still, going through things and growing, but who currently uses it and how are they applying it to get results?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Because the whole analytical space has been where we spent maybe the first 2 years in. But me personally, I was about to say I don't really care about, so much how things are. I'm really fascinated about how they could be, So what does that mean? We can assess you in a particular way, but to be precise, there is no feedback or not a lot of feedback involved, like in the overall experience. It's kind of just like measuring you, eyes open, eyes closed, while you do something. And then we have a snapshot of your current mind and body state. What is really fascinating, and where we got into starting with end of 2015, 2016, is now the feedback part, the neurofeedback, the biofeedback part. Because if we now apply that, we have a closed loop learning system. So now it's not really focused anymore on where you currently are at. That initial analysis determines what you should be or what you could be training, what you could be working on. And what's now possible with the system that we have that kind of like does the analysis in real time and then feeds it back to you to kind of like teach you something. That's what really, really excites me. And initially, we have been working with neurofeedback loops, kind of like games, and you play the game using your mind. If we stick with the ADHD example and we assume, that your particular ADHD is based on your frontal lobe at a particular area not active enough, and you play the car racing game, then the car drives faster if you're able to activate it a little bit more, get like to the focus state, and the car slows down if your activation drops. Now, like what you have to do in that particular setup is just keep the car going as fast as possible. Like the speed of the car changes like within 50 to 100 milliseconds after the change. And so it's a mirror of your current level of focus. So by having that experience, by trying to get the car going fast and realizing it's a constant yes and no. When the car goes faster, you get a yes. When it goes slower, it's a no. And that's how we learn, right? As human beings, you do something and then you get feedback. Like you either get a reward or you get punished. So it's not that we really punish people. So we use that, the speed of a car, the volume of a music, and so on. What's very important, and that's where we spend quite some time on, is that it's the same with every learning experience. If you doctor something that you don't want it to do, and you punish the dog a day later, there's like no relation, to the action. So the doctor's like, what the fuck is wrong with that, right? So, and for like a learning experience in regards to the brain, depending on the modality, we talk about, like we at Neuromore, we try to stick around like 50 to maximum 100 milliseconds, between like we determine something and we feed it back to you. And now the beauty, what happens, even like when we did the initial tests, still like at universities, people came up to us and said, oh, I found a way to trick your system. Now I found a way, like I can control the speed of the car on purpose. There must be a flaw in your system. I hacked it. And we're like, oh, amazing. Because now you've figured out how to be focused when you want to. And that's the potential with that kind of technology, you know. And like, now I'm just talking about neurofeedback with biofeedback. It's kind of like relaxation on demand.
Yeah, what you talk about, what's really great about that, and I want to chime in here just a little bit, is the fact that what is the point of play, right? What is the point of, if you look at that, like why do animals play fight, right? Because play is a form of practice, right? A form of practice, and that's why tigers play fight, and then because they're play fighting, hunting, and killing out in the wild, right? And you're talking about turning something into a game. The reason why humans like games more than they like real life is that games are simple, direct, easy to understand, and you have a clear progression. The challenge with life is to choose your own adventure with infinite options, right? With little to no feedback, right? It's like I eat a cake now, can't really tell that I'm gaining the weight, right? If I go fight with a loved one, I don't really know that I messed up in it because I'm unaware. If my wife gets mad at me and I don't know why she's mad at me, and I'm trying to recall what happened in the last 9 months to get her mad at me, I don't have that feedback loop. That a game is much more simple, direct, and gives you a sense of autonomy, progress, and mastery to move up towards something. And what's great about this is you're taking some things that are inherent benefits of being mindful, like focus, and you're putting it directly into a game. So you're having a closed feedback loop of a game. So it allows people to then focus, which I think is great, and say, okay, I understand the game. My goal for the game, make car go faster. But really what you're doing is you're taking complex, measurement systems of the brain and everything else, and you're feeding it into a closed feedback loop. So you're training them to become more focused. So if someone wants to be more focused, but it's very hard to tell, you don't have any feedback, it's very convoluted, right? Unless you're a monk and you go meditate for 40 years on top of a mountain, it's hard to really know if you're there or you're not there. So you're making the invisible visible and putting it in front of people's faces and helping them by turning it into games. And I think that's fantastic, because I think we all want to play in order to level up. But sometimes, it's hard and it's boring and you don't know if you're doing it right and you're not too sure what's going on, and it can be very frustrating. So I'd love to kind of dive into this a little bit more. You're talking about using games plus biofeedback to help people progress on some sort of leveling up system for their psyche or mental health or resilience or mindfulness, or insert the word that you want to insert for helping people become better in this esoteric, ephemeral, soft skills section. Can you talk to me just a little bit more about any other examples you have around using games? So you have focus, someone is unfocused, probably ADHD or whatever, and you want to help them become focused, and you're using that biofeedback with the car racing game. Is there any other examples that you've done to help people get from A to B, unfocused to focus, by using biofeedback plus gaming technology?
There is. Let me approach it.
Yeah.
In this way. So I think there's a full spectrum of where people are. From like peak performance, brain training, major league athletes. Like getting out the last 2%. I think that's like on one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum might be someone who's seriously depressed or traumatized or cannot go out of bed. Right?
Yeah.
So everyone wants to progress, like on the one hand, we most likely have a medical condition and someone really needs help to get back to normal. So we have that spectrum, like in general, from brain state perspective. And you mentioned flow, like if we look at flow, there's a particular flow cycle out there, that also contains the different stages that we could be in, so one of those stages is to be focused. One of those stages is to be relaxed. One of them is to be in flow. And eventually one of those is to sleep. So to simplify it, like, let's assume every human being is like in one of those 4 stages at any given time. So what we can do and what we have been doing successfully is to help people to be able to get into a particular state and to maintain it. But to live a healthy life, it's also extremely important to be able to transition into different stages. Because if I'm in that focus state and I got stuck there and I'm unable to get out of it, then eventually I will end up struggling, and then eventually we will call that burnout.
Yeah.
Because I'm constantly stuck there. So to approach it in a more holistic way, and from my perspective, it doesn't really matter so much at what part of the spectrum you kind of like start improving yourself. It's like you said, it's important that we sleep. It's important that we're able to relax. It's also important that we focus and get in new knowledge. And then eventually it's also extremely rewarding for everyone to excel and just like be in that like flowy place. So after we spent those first 2 years mostly focused on research, we started working with major league athletes and clinics, as well as with the military to do studies for PTSD. But like in a nutshell, it was constantly all about helping people from a neurofeedback standpoint to cycle, to transition into another state of consciousness or another brain state, like for all those four stages that I refer to, there's a certain dominant frequency that we can see in the brain, like for focus, it's SMR, which is kind of like low beta, for relaxation, it's alpha, for flow, we talk about high theta, for sleep, it's delta. There's also like neurotransmitters, neurochemicals that are related to it. So that's kind of like the brain aspect. And what we also added to most of those experiences is the heart rate variability aspect, which is more like a more physiological approach, because no matter what stage you're in, like you're always like most of the time benefiting from just like not being extremely stressed out, and just like being relaxed. So what we did, we used the heart rate variability to guide you into like a optimized breathing rhythm while informing the rest of the experience based on your brainwaves. So now you mentioned something else extremely important, and it is the guidance, like knowing what to do, not knowing what to do. And that's something that like initially, like the neurofeedback clinics that we have been serving had a very simple setup. So there was like the neurofeedback software, like a brain scanner, and now there was a psychiatrist or a trained neurofeedback practitioner sitting right next to the coachee or patient, or like whatever like the context was guiding them through it. Because otherwise, if I just like sit you in front of like a screen and there's a car, like you have no idea what to do. So like eventually you get frustrated, so, and that's where the whole realm of cognitive behavior therapy, comes in, like guiding you through things, guided visualization and so on. And that also motivated us because I already mentioned earlier, we thought we have the holy grail to democratize mental health and roll it out. So keeping that in the back of our heads then also meant, okay, now we have a game, and we can roll that game out. There's a game, brain scanners need to be shipped out, and then everyone can download that game. But we cannot send like 1 billion people to like 1 billion users out there who sit right next to them. So we started to enhance the system that we have for also being able to have interactive storylines for guidance, like hello Dylan, please put it on. Oh, please look here because it's not well connected, okay, like welcome, try this, feel this, and so on, which is extremely important. And I think that's also something that's pretty unique about our platform, which is the combination of, I would say, traditional neurofeedback and biofeedback together with interactive, personalized, individualized guidance. And in regards to guidance, we have been working with a bunch of different coaches, trainers, psychologists, and therapists, where I personally have the strongest feelings and belief for like cognitive behavior therapy, with ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy, like parts therapy, like framing things. Oh, it's just a part of you that does that, not a part of you that's kind of like distracted, and framing it in that way and guiding you through it, which then becomes a more comprehensive experience, because the neurofeedback, for instance, by itself is, I would say, mostly focused on reconditioning your neurophysiology more like on a subconscious level. And the CBT is now more like looking at the software of your brain, and I think the combination of those two things, and it's still like an ongoing question for me, and like what part is like the software, what's the hardware, and then like obviously the software can influence the hardware and so on. So it's kind of like the completely integrated system, to say. And but like fast forward, so we had that in the clinical realm, and we are actually about to roll the first products out to consumer, because when we initially started 2014, the market wasn't ready. There were quite some aspects that kept us from rolling it out to consumers. Like one of the missing pieces was a convenient, affordable brain-computer interface. Because I said, the emotive epoch. That being said, I don't know, like if you know it, but like there's like all those different mini sponges. You have to soak water.
It's great if you're bald. Yeah.
Well, you're well off. I'm not so much anymore.
Yeah, totally.
It's like, oh, you do the training and then like wash your hairs.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So there's better headsets out right now. Are you talking about like the Muse, or what are the ones that you're talking about right now that are the affordable, good ones that are out the gate?
Well, we integrate with the Muse and different ones. And that being said, our approach with the consumer play that we're about to get into is to provide consumers with almost as good as like a clinical medical device, being able to do a proper brain map, which requires not only a certain count of electrodes, but you also want to look at the whole brain. And for instance, that the Muse is an amazing device focused on the prefrontal lobe and like default mode network, meditation tracking and so on. But that being said, just like based on how it's being built, it's unable to look at other parts of your brain, which is important to do like a proper like QEEG brain map, for instance. The device is promising currently from a hardware standpoint is the NextStem, as well as the Neurosity, the Crown.
Is that the name of the? I'm sorry. Is that the name of the hardware device you're talking about? NextStem.
Yes, hardware devices.
Okay. Yeah.
They kind of like over the last year-ish, they came to market, and dry electrodes, like good sensor quality. And we're really excited about that. And also based on being in the space since 2014, as of today, we connect to more than 50 different brain-computer interfaces and so on, because we have been true to our nature. We're a software company. We do software, we do platform, we do services around that software, but like we're not getting involved in hardware. So that being said, a software that processes real-time biodata cannot do much without the real-time biodata that obviously comes out of hardware, So we have been waiting for other people to step up who kind of like disembark on the journey of creating consumer-facing device, and like the variables are, I think, are pretty straightforward. It needs to be affordable. The quality needs to be good, and
It's always a trade-off. We're always constantly waiting like the hardware is always like trying to take 10 pounds of shit and put it in a 5-pound bag. You're always trying to max it out at a higher level, do more with less and everything else.
Yeah.
Like the, and it was like virtual reality headsets. It's always like, $50,000 systems and those, and, as someone who builds those types of applications, you're like, okay, I want it super small, super light, super affordable, but I also want to be able to bring in all of World of Warcraft and shove it into a little mobile headset that also processes in real time, which is, a daunting task. And I don't ever want to mess with hardware. That's a terrible place to be in, because you are limited by physics and what you can do with that. So, and Moore's law. So looking at that, what I like about this is, so you're progressing on a consumer path where you're saying the hardware now is good enough. And so you're talking about the Muse is only meant to prefrontal cortex, ruminating mind, default mode network, which is basically, the narrative part of the brain, which oddly enough is something that I think you probably have extra experience with. What I do want to touch on is that you did some work, I know, with Dr. Jeffrey Martin, and they had the great book called Finders, where they deconstructed enlightenment, and they went along the path and said, okay, these are the different spots. These are the different kinds of areas of enlightenment, stage 1 to stage 4, stage 5. And this is what this means, right? I'd love to, you helped in that piece of that. And I'd love to kind of talk to you a little bit about, because I feel like it's going to segue into it, enlightenment, parts of the brain that means that you're enlightened. What is the technical other half to that deconstructing enlightenment piece? And how does that show up on a neurofeedback, neuroscience level?
Well, like the definition of Jeffrey in regards to the enlightenment, he calls it ongoing non-symbolic experience or persistent non-symbolic experience, right?
Yeah.
And from a definition standpoint, how he looks at it, it's strongly tied to emotions, right? Like the stages that you describe is kind of like initially having like mostly negative emotions, having mixed emotions, and having like solely positive emotions, towards having one constant ongoing positive emotion, might be love, towards no emotion at all, right?
Yeah.
And on that particular continuum. So what we helped them with was the data collection. With the kind of we enable them to collect remotely not only brain waves but also heart rate variability, as well as galvanic skin response, while people have been guided through the particular Finders course protocol.
I feel like what you're talking about, a bit of that is around, positive states, right? And if you look at like enlightenment states, is that you can only it's like you're only allowed to feel one half of your emotional spectrum. You can feel neutral or positive joy, but if you go into the negative side, that's like anti-stoic. You lose that side of things. But I think part of that also is when I wanted to bring it up and why I felt like it tied to it. It's all about the ruminating mind default mode network, where you don't have those storylines that will impact you negatively. Like, oh, I'm not happy because I'm not as rich as, Bill Gates or whatever, right? Or whatever that thing might be. But isn't it a part of it not only just the emotions, which is one part of the system, but another part of it is the default mode network, ruminating mind, narrative story driven self, and what that and how that actually facilitates the creation. If we're talking about software layers of the human experience, you have base feelings, narrative storylines that then affect physiology, psychology, all that fun stuff. So if you're looking at that, isn't it a combination though of narratives and ruminating minds and also emotions?
Absolutely. So I think we can look at it. So there's the emotional aspect, right?
Yeah.
And I would say that based on like the model that he created, that level 4 or 5 is not necessarily better than level 3. I personally think it really depends. Obviously, you don't want to have negative emotions. I think there's no benefit in like having negative emotions, right? But that being said, if you don't have any emotions at all anymore, you might be not in an optimal. It depends what you want to do. If you want to run a company, if you want to raise a child, eventually you still want to feel something for it to be somehow like to care about it, because otherwise it's like don't care about it.
What do you do in this world?
So then in those regards, and then to what you just mentioned, of course, it's totally true. Like the default mode network, a storyline, the narrative. So I would say there's like two different ways how you can look at it. It's kind of like in the mind and on the mind, right? So on the one hand, we have positive psychology, kind of like involving yourself in a particular practice and reinforcing to be grateful, to think good things, trying to change your thoughts towards positive thoughts. And then on the other hand, there is another aspect to not be too tied up in your thoughts, right? Kind of like to be mindful, to be aware of your thoughts, but not to identify with them. Kind of like to see thoughts coming and going without being into them. Kind of like having that observance, like, oh, I just saw that, but like not getting lost in it, not getting lost in that monkey mind in the stories, in the narratives. So to summarize that, I think there's the emotional part, and eventually the thoughts are informing your emotions, and eventually your emotions inform like your thoughts, so like if you have positive emotions, eventually you will feel better. But then on the other hand, I think it's also very important not to be too caught up in your thoughts, like not to identify with your thoughts, if that makes sense, just like from that enlightenment standpoint, to have that ongoing good experience. I think those are like the different, I don't want to say ingredients, but like eventually different perspectives how you can look at it. Kind of like to be mindful of your thoughts, having positive or beneficial thoughts. I think maybe that's another way to look at it, that your thoughts, your behaviors, and your emotions are helping you and who you want to be, are like contributing to like towards your higher or highest self, instead of like being in the way. So it's like, oh, I'm not good enough, oh my gosh, like he has more money than me, I'm doomed, and whatever, like. And I guess we all get there on the other hand. I think it's also part of the human experience on the other hand, which is very, very interesting, because I think there's all those ideals saying, oh, like I only want to have this, I only want to do that. But it's just like my personal opinion. Same here. I think it's a full spectrum. Eventually, you can only be as happy, as sad as you're able to be, every now and then.
Yeah, what's really interesting about that, as we're talking about it, is, humans are prediction machines. That's what we're doing. We're predicting. If I put my foot in front of myself, I'm predicting that there's going to be ground underneath me. Walking is just a series of fallings, right? But I have belief. I have a narrative story that my foot's going to hit some ground in front of me, and it's all going to work out. So we're constantly predicting, but at the same time, we're getting these signals, these biofeedback, these emotional signals sent to us, right? And so this energy that can come into me, I can either take it as anxiety or excitement, right? But that right there is that second layer up of the narrative storyline, that the meaning-making machines, the predictive models, that what this means is that I'm excited because this has challenged me to grow. Or what this means is that I have anxiety because I don't think I can take it. It depends on how far you're pushing that check me high flow zone, right? Are you pushing above the boundaries? Or are you going below the boundaries? Are you bored in this? Or are you calm and relaxed? Is it anxiety and excitement? So it's being able to take those feelings, the biofeedback feelings that you're getting, apply those narratives on top of it, and then leveraging it so it's your benefit, so that your emotions, much like technology, is serving you. And it's not inhibiting you from actually being able to like thrive at wherever you want to get to, right? Because no matter what happens, a thing that could enhance your life, or I'm trying to find a way to put this because it's difficult in terms of labeling, but so you have experiences that could be a positive benefit I get hit by a car. Oh, woe is me, the world's offered. Oh, I get hit by a car. Oh, great. This gives me another challenge to grow from, right? It's just the applied meaning that you're giving the events. The Viktor Frankl book, Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. Do you know about that story? Okay, so yeah. So he just talks about between stimulus and response is our ability to choose, and there lies your greatest power. And so what I like about what you're doing here is you're giving people more awareness in between stimulus, right, how they're feeling and what's going on, and the response they want to give. And so what you're using is like cognitive behavioral therapy, if you want to say it, CBT, or this acceptance model. And you're saying, okay, this is what is. Now, what do you want to do? Great, take these steps forward to get you to the point where you want to be. And so, and that's why I was curious about the finders piece, because I don't personally want to have no emotions. I don't want to get that thing. I don't like that.
Me neither.
I want to be, nothing affects me. I don't care about anything. I want to revel in the joy and the beauty and all that stuff. And if there's sorrow, you cry, you let it go, you embrace it, and there's that. And so I think there's value in that. And if anybody wants to be there, great. I'm happy for them. Enjoy that lifestyle. It's a choose your own adventure kind of thing. Okay. But what I want to tie in with what you're talking about. So like, how did you leverage the lessons learned from applying that and that studies with non-dual consciousness and all that stuff, and there were the things that you pulled from that you leveraged into neuromore that really help people kind of get to where they want to go? Because obviously what you're saying is what you're providing is the game board of life, right? This is what you're feeling, and this is what's going on in your world, right? Great. Well, what game are you playing? Is the game of being more focused? Is it the game of, what is that game what lessons? What I want to know from you is, what did you take from those studies and those experiments helping with those people? And then how did you bring it over to your own company in terms of lessons, insights, stories, examples, to be able to help people get from where they're at to where they want to go?
Mm-hmm. So in full transparency, from the enlightenment standpoint, there is maybe down the road applications. Mm-hmm. Initially, I'm mostly excited about creating, or our ability to assess you and create a personalized brain training plan for, let's say, the next week or the next 2 weeks. I think it's very, very important to have that personalized, individualized set of exercises. Totally. And then to reassess it very quickly, because otherwise it would be, you start working out, you do weight training, and well, if in 2 weeks you still use the same weight, something is wrong, right? So we need to change. And eventually, if you constantly do you want to look, okay, where's the current bottleneck? And then you might realize, my biceps is a little bit too weak. Okay, let's do a week of biceps. And I'm kind of simplifying, right? But then a week later, we look, your biceps is fine. Now we might want to do your shoulders, to constantly balance you out on the one hand. But then also, and I think that's where subjective input is very important, to understand, what do you want to do? Like, are you training for a marathon that's happening in like 3 months? Or do you want to do kite surfing? Mm-hmm. Or do you want to sit in a chair all day long and just make sure that you don't have any issues like long term? Like different things that you would do to your body. And I would say, compared to our mind, the brain, and consciousness, our body and the muscles, I think, are pretty well understood and pretty simple, So, and that's why we, and also me personally, strongly believe in that constantly changing interactive system that looks at you right now and say, okay, like for the next couple of days, do that. And then reassess, because reassessing not only to see if you change to kind of like up the game, to keep it challenging and so on, but on the other hand, I think what's also extremely important is to see if it worked for you. Because I think there's a lot of people out there, they try meditations and, it doesn't work for me. That meditation is like, great. Maybe we just didn't find like the particular way how to do it. And I think it's pretty much with all of it. And that's where I love the data the objective data as well as the subjective. Just like say, okay, amazing, we figured out what doesn't work for you. Let's try the next, until we found something that moves the needle that you want to move. And then you can keep on reinforcing that, and then also do different things, and that's also like an aspect coming back to that, to the intention to democratize mental health. There's so many people out there suffering, right? And like the pandemic and wars and so on eventually don't make it any better. And access to doctors is extremely limited, right? So, and a doctor, the Latin word doctor translates to teacher. So I think like back in the day, or like a doctor, if you see a doctor, should ask you, oh, what are you missing? And like looking at it from an approach, eventually educational, and that's also why I love like the CBT approach, because that resonates pretty well with that. So, oh, you have that issue, so eventually you need to see something from a different perspective. It might be transformation, or you might just like want to learn something new, change a particular behavior, and so on. But now there's like so many different ways. Beginning, maybe you're more receptive to a man or a woman talking to you. Or one of the things, like from the Finders course, we also need to maintain rapport, because if you want to set an intention, what's the most efficient way to do that? It depends what you believe in, and it depends on your belief system. You can pray to God. But if you don't believe in God and I ask you to pray to God, eventually I lost you in that particular second, and you mentally gone.
Yeah.
Or you might ask the universe to support you. Or you might want to set an intention, and it's just like 3 different ways from my perspective to do exactly the same. And eventually it makes all the difference. And the technology that we have as of today enables us not only to ask you what resonates with you, but also to realize what really works for you. Now it's kind of like maybe the geeky part of me, but yeah, I want to use like your programming language to change your programs, right? And like if I use a programming language or a language that you don't understand, it might be pretty meaningless what I'm telling you, like what I'm doing to you. So, yeah. But once I speak the right language and use the right ways, then tremendous change can happen. Yeah. And if we ignore, even if we ignore the fact that like access to doctors is already a luxury good, I would say even like in the Western world, if you go to see a doctor and they have an anxiety, most likely you will end up with a box of pills, like, that's the solution. And eventually it's not like the most sustainable solution. But now, even if you can afford to see whoever you want to see, I think it will be an extremely complicated journey for you because you don't know who you want to see. You don't know for yourself what modality works for you. Like what style works for you. And what we see, what will be straightforward, more or less straightforward, is like once we have a digital representations of all the teachings without any ego involved whatsoever, then we just like throw virtual spaghettis at you and like we just like keep on throwing them that stick, right?
Yeah, no, I love it. I love the concept of throwing virtual spaghetti at people and seeing what sticks. But you're right in terms of, we're talking about precision medicine. We're moving an area where, we hunter-gatherer tribes, all that stuff. Then we move into big cities where everything kind of becomes these templates, the areas of industrial revolution where it's like, we're going to make 1,000, pieces of paper the same or whatever it might be. It's that. But we're now using a combination of this AI and this big data and these known frameworks to apply towards an area of precision medicine or precision personal care that allows them to be able to say, okay, I'm, who do you pray to, right? Spirit, source, God, Allah, whatever it might be, and it's going to turn you off. And so you're saying there's different elements that will get people to get from where they're at to where they want to go, either from unhealthy mental unhealth to mental health, or mental health to mental optimization. right? And there's two sides of those spectrums. One side's therapy, the other side's coaching. One fixes trauma of the past, while the other one focuses on future oriented, right? Those are just the way those things look, and they work. But understanding where are you at on that spectrum, where do you want to go, and then you run them through a series of diagnostics that go, okay, you want to have a very attractive female be your coach and tell you all the things that you want to hear, a lot of positive things, no kick in the pants, and we also want you to be able to, whatever the thing might be for that person, and then you can feed them that experience, or you can feed them that type of modality, using the frameworks that make sense from the teacher, the coach that makes sense, that will resonate with the person, that will create the most effective change, that is also effective and also long lasting. Is that kind of the goal by putting these pieces together?
Yeah, that's correct, because we can almost abuse neurofeedback and biofeedback protocols to constantly assess if you like an experience or not. If the music that we're currently playing to you relaxes you or not.
Yeah. So in terms of like or not, is that biofeedback or is that self-reported?
It's biofeedback, neurofeedback, and biofeedback. Like for like a couple of years now, we are able to not on an absolute scale determine the emotions, but emotional tendencies. Like
one second. I got to tell you about a thing. I saw a guy do. He was some hacker online. He hooked up a brainwave thing to say what you like and you don't like, and he hooked it up to Tinder. And so it automatically swiped back and forth on the girls he liked. And he goes, oh, that's really interesting. But then he hooked it up to the guy version of Tinder where it's only guys and he's a straight male. And he saw mostly no's, but occasionally it went yes. He goes, he's like, what does that say about me? It was really funny. As you're talking about liking and don't liking and whether or not you have an opinion in the matter of if you liking or not liking things. Some side note, just want to share it as one geeky fun hack. But please continue. You're talking about what they like, what they don't like. And
like is a very broad term, because if we do relaxation like exercise, then eventually the goal is to relax you, for instance. So I can ask you what music you want to listen to, but there's also like a nice story from like the early days, like back end of 2013, early 2014, when we were testing the first version of the neuromore studio. So we had the emotive epoch. It was like the campus of the university in Stuttgart. And we wanted to do a very simple focus assessment. So the setup was very simple. We're like playing music to people to see if the music helps them to get more focused or not. People came in, and like most of them, it wasn't like a control, like huge study. We were just like looking for people like at the campus, like computer science campus, so like the whole population there was kind of like computer science students. And a lot of them came in and we were like, focus. It was like, what music are you listening to when you learn? It was like, I do that Mozart for brain power and here. So brain scanner on, software turned on. Okay, we have a baseline, and then we started playing the Mozart for brain power. What we saw was like almost all of them is that the opposite of focus happened. They got extremely unfocused. And we started like asking them, and it was like, it's weird, because like the initial idea also for them, like self-reported, was, I always listen to that music when I learn because it's like, it says Mozart for brain power. Long story short, after like doing that with like 20 people and like most of the guys and girls that we did that, we asked them, what's your favorite music? They were like hard rock, heavy metal. We played that. They got extremely focused. And like the takeaway was, just listen to the music that you like the most, and that will get you focused. Because learning with that Mozart for brain power is like eventually the worst thing that you can do to yourself if you want to focus. Because it was like, no, it makes sense. Yeah, it really annoys me. It makes me like, why do you listen to it? Because it says like Mozart for brain power. And I think that's like a very simple, primitive example, that a lot of people do a lot of things, like based on conditioning, based on like whatever labeling, without having any awareness what is very good for them. And I think it's also a neat way to pivot into a very, very important topic.
Yeah.
because I believe that those tools, like the tools that we create, are built and are meant to connect people with themselves and their intuition, So we explicitly don't want to create a tool that like people use constantly for the same thing. It's more like once you learn to focus, you don't need the tool anymore. You might come back to use the tool to do something else, improve somewhere else, and so on, But it's really a learning system. And once you learn something, once you had an insight, once you learned how to drive a car, you don't have to go to driving school again, right? You might go back to school for something else. And it's also how we look at it from like a business model retention standpoint, like maintenance to do something else. But I don't want anyone ever to become a monthly recurring subscriber for anxiety or any kind of issues. We want to get people healthy as quickly and as fast as possible. And then, they might come back, to do some maintenance, to do some optimization, or might just like stop using the system whatsoever because they say, oh, I don't have any issues anymore. I'm totally fine and I don't need anything else. I realized I have everything that I have, everything that I need. I don't need anything else. And
that's a terrible business plan. I'm gonna tell you. You want to keep them hooked, No, that's but it's beautiful. You're talking about like a learning progressive plan, right? Okay, where are you at on the spectrum? You want to get from A to B? That's great. Later on, if you want to get to X to Z, great. And you have these different paths for people to follow. And I think that's beautiful. And you're right. It's people want the result of the brain power, but they're trying to do it the Mozart way. When they're not the Mozart way, they're the EDM music way or whatever it might be. It's like, you got the result, but you need to test out yourself to get that precision medicine. Okay, great. You got clarity in what you want. Now, how do you get there? What works for you? And it's not going to be the same for everybody else. But once you find that, you can run them through the systems to really get that down. And once they learn that and they integrate that and they absorb that and they realize, okay, I have that tool in my belt. I now know how to use that hammer. Great. What's the next tool I need to learn? Here's some other tools I need to learn along the path for where I want to go. Because maybe I live in a place of abundance and joy 100% of the time. And maybe my friend wants to have no emotions and be a complete robot and live his life that way. It's totally fine. We're going to have two different paths, two different tools, two different outcomes, two different results, right? But we both want to be better. And the problem is that definition of better is different from my interpretation to the other person's interpretation. So, which is great the way that you say that you understand that, like, brain power Mozart. By the way, if I saw that on Spotify, I'd probably click it and I probably wouldn't enjoy the music, but I'd want that brain power. It's just not the fuel that works the power of my brain.
It's individual, and it might also change for you as well, like with the hammer, because we're like at different stages in life, different circumstances, and like the only thing that I know with certainty, like I'm not the person that I used to be a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, so we all changed one way or the other, so.
And I think, on this point, I do want to ask you this, with the company and with everything you're doing, like, what's your, what I call holy grail? Like, what's that flag in the sand on the top of the mountain that made you know that you've completed your end goal with creating neuromore? What does that look like to you?
I would say like the current goal that we're striving for is to have an affordable, accessible, sustainable alternative to what's currently being offered in the mental health space, So, and I'm talking about an alternative, but like if someone like reaches out to his doctor or GP with like anxiety issues, that there's pills, there's offerings, but then there's also the option for people to get a box that contains a particular device, a brain scanner with like some additional modalities, and is then just able to learn or get rid of that particular anxiety, whatever it might entail, most likely some forgiving yourself, forgiving others, processing certain things, like letting go of certain things and so on, But to sum it up, like I would say like we reached like the goal or kind of like a next huge milestone. Once we have an alternative in the market that people can use to learn themselves how to alleviate things that they're suffering with. Because the thing is, and we already have been working with like major league athletes and so on, and it was like it's extremely fascinating to do that. But from a pure purpose standpoint, like, do we make the world a better place if we help team 1 to like win against team number 2 because they have a little bit more like mental flexibility or stamina or whatever? Actually not. But
Purpose versus profit.
But can we reduce like the percentage of people who take prescription drugs in the US, significantly? I think now we're getting somewhere, can we? And then what I see as the next milestone is preventative medicine, which then eventually is personalized, individualized education to keep people from getting sick in the first place, right? And then eventually also children, kind of like, what do you need to learn? What do you need to do? What skills do you need to have to kind of like never get depressed, like just like stay on a good side to kind of like have a dual approach to it, and if we just talk about education, I would say it's also, or it should be a highly individualized, personalized process. Eventually, but the institutional school system coming out of the age of the Industrial Revolution, like I went to school in Germany, I think it's pretty much the same in the US, at least for most of the schools. There's all those boxes and all the kids are being put in exactly the same box and we learn all the same. Maybe there's like some choices like here and there, but I think the things that really matter to be creative, to express yourself, to learn how to deal with emotions, how to relate to each other and so on are topics that are currently not being taught.
Yeah.
It might also be a reason that people have to learn it the hard way.
Yeah.
In a more therapeutic realm down the road,
Yeah, pain's a heck of a motivator,
Of course. Pain, frustration, like I've just seen that like parts of like my girl, she's currently watching that Richard Branson documentary. And you're like saying like most of the innovations have been created out of frustration. That's kind of like why Branson created his airline. He was frustrated being treating so shitty.
Not doing this anymore. Okay, so if you're talking about making affordable, sustainable, personalized health, and that's what you want to get into, and from the educational space, and not helping the for the masses, right, and reducing the drug taking and providing this alternative to health. What do you think is your dragon? What is the thing that, in order to overcome it, is going to be the most difficult thing for you to do? What's your dragon?
So the dragon, like we already slayed a few dragons, so I'm kind of like excited to meet the next one, if that makes sense. Because one of the dragons to slay was some no hardware devices being available. And I would say over the course of literally the last couple of months, we kind of like solved that issue. I think the next big dragon will be a pushback from the current system, to say, so, and I personally have strong feelings, just like from a strategic standpoint, because it's not that we're against pills. It's not that we're against what's currently out there, like in form like of a medical system. We look at it more from a perspective to make it more efficient, to increase the efficacy of like the current offerings, to augment them, to complement them. But all that being said, I still expect a lot of pushback, a lot of people that are anxious, because I've been touching base on that earlier. And I think not only in the mental health space, but also in the mental health space, the players that are involved are like for-profit companies, organizations, and they need recurring revenues.
Yeah.
It's like a psychologist who would heal you within like 15 minutes would be out of business eventually, or maybe not, because everyone would go there.
Yeah.
But like the fear, like, oh, I'm gonna see you next week and next week, and then if I hear from people, oh, I've been working with my psychologist on this for like 4 years. They're just like, oh, maybe do something else,
Yeah.
But it's so common, and I think there will be a bunch of trends that say, oh, like you're trying to take our business away. You're doing this, and
It makes sense, man. I mean, you know, the question is, it's self-focused or other-focused, right? And people are like, they want to be able to have recurring revenue. And then if you come into their business stream and you're taking away money because you're healing people, it's one thing that people are hungry. People always have to eat food. You got to keep supplying food because that's a natural recurring cycle. You got to eat to live. You got to move forward, right, as a product. But and you're talking on the health side of things, what happens if you cure cancer? What happens if you fix problems that are someone's paycheck? And at the same time, though, but if you do that and you create that goodwill for people, they would refer people. If someone was in a therapist's office for 5 years and then they go in and they fix it themselves on their own in a couple of weeks or whatever, that therapist is going to lose a lot of business because they're going to tell a bunch of people, hey, man, don't spend all your money here. It doesn't work. Right? Because at the end of the day, we want results. We want to feel better. We want to be more. We want to, whatever the thing might be, we want a result. And if you're providing something that is inherently better, horse-drawn bug and waggies versus a Ford car, in general speaking, you're going to put people out of business, but we got to grow. You got to let go of stuff. You got to let go of some old ways. There's not many blacksmiths anymore making shoe horses, but that's the way at the time. So it does sound like.
And we have those cycles, right? Like in general, like the disruption through technology in general. And we will see it like all over from like self-driving cars, I guess we will see it with like accounting, I think the US is more progressive now, like QuickBooks is connected and like everything happens by itself. But there's countries like Germany where it's still common sense that someone is sitting there and doing it by hand. And like those people will do whatever they can to kind of like keep their identity. They have been doing that like for 30 years. And I think, I can say that just also based on the research, unrelated, related, but I guess people are more likely to die before they change, So there's like a strong identification of like what they do, and like, oh my gosh, like,
totally.
What do you mean? I'm not supposed to do that tomorrow. So I think that it will happen like throughout like many different businesses, but including here, and I think there's a particular dilemma in healthcare for itself, because I'm totally aware that everything that we do and that we are up to requires money, resources.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's undoable.
Yeah.
But then there's a huge part of mine that says, how is it possible that healthcare is an industry, a for-profit industry? Like, it's wrong.
It's just yeah. So yeah, prison systems also, that type of thing. It doesn't quite make sense. Is there anything else? I mean, this is amazing. I love the fact that I love your mission. I love that you're empowering people to make their own health decisions and really kind of remove moving the middleman from them and their health, which I think is fantastic. Is there anything else you'd like to let people know about before you tell them how to get a hold of you and your company?
What do I want people to know? Like we're here to empower people, and I think it's very important that we're not trying to get rid of the middleman. So I think it's because if we look at the people globally that have issues and the amount and number of doctors that are available, there's a huge like difference. And just looking at like the Western world, like the eventually highly developed or not so highly developed and evolved like Western world, So for us, it's more about like helping all, and maybe not the middlemen per se, but all the doctors, the teachers, the people who can really help people
Mm.
do things differently, to make them more accessible, to help them, to reach way more people. So it's not about replacing them. It's for us not about replacing a human being. It's more about addressing the current issue with scalability and affordability, because the as of today answer, especially in the mental health space for scalability and affordability, is pills. And I'm not against particular compounds that can be amazing to interrupt patterns, like we're also extremely active in the psychedelic therapeutic space, but as people know who are like in that space, the preparation is important, and eventually even more important is the integration, it's just like going from like peak experience to peak experience, and just like shifts you from like, oh, I'm not depressed anymore, but I have to do that treatment now like every 2 weeks, so like it's not sustainable.
I completely agree. And there's lots of different medicines, not always bad. It's just, when does it serve you, and when does it harm you? And that's kind of individualized, and also looking at those, how do you integrate the medicine to actually change you versus letting, pushing the button and wishing that you don't have to change, right? There's that whole ego death issue. So it makes a lot of sense. You want to scale the impact of the transformative change and just make it easier for the masses.
Exactly.
It's fantastic. And if people want to get a hold of you, Patrick, how do they do that?
Well, there's our website out there,
Mm-hmm.
which is neuromore.com.
Mm-hmm.
And the website as of today, it's still focused on our B2B enterprise model, like the clinical model.
Mm-hmm.
What I have been talking about today is the very exciting to consumer route that we're getting into. So over the course of the next couple of weeks, we will also add more information to our website there. So I think that's the easiest way to check out our website with mailing list.
Cliffhanger. All right. Stay tuned, everybody. Something special is coming. If you're not a clinician or a university, you can go to his website in a couple of weeks and find out some super exciting news. So stay tuned, everybody. Patrick, thank you so much for your time, brother. I appreciate you coming on the show. Appreciate all the work that you do. Much love and light. And I will see you on the other side, brother.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and have a good day.
You too. Take care now. Bye.
Ciao.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes of Reality podcast. Check out heroesofreality.com for more episodes. While you're there, you can also take the Heroes quiz to find out what kind of hero you are. Or, if you have a great story and want to be on the podcast, tell us why your hero's journey will inspire others. Thank you for listening. See you on the